Flow is an animated film that got a lot of buzz recently, with it even being nominated for the upcoming Oscars against The Wild Robot. Flow is the beautiful story of a cat and a few other animals trying to survive a catastrophic flood, told with no dialogue since animals can't talk. And with it being a story of the flood, of course, it gets very mythological and spiritual. This is already quite the interesting approach to an animated movie, but to make it even more amazing, the film was made with a very small crew scattered across Latvia and France. While the credits of the film look larger on the surface, the majority of the titles are producers and managers of different companies, basically legal credits for producing instead of actual animators. While rumor had it that it was made by just 5 animators, and perhaps 5 did handle the bulk of the work, there are definitely more than 5 animator credits alone, as well as other jobs. But it's amazing how much of this film is done by such a tiny crew, especially with just how breathtaking it is. The story of Flow started out with a cat just living out in the woods where a lot of other animals are roaming around that the cat generally tries to avoid. The key theme of the film is how these catastrophic events affect people and bring them together. And the choice to start with the story of this cat really emphasizes that. Cats tend to be loners. They do exist in groups and can be social, but they say the key difference between a dog and a cat is that a dog will show you that he loves you, and a cat will pretend like it's a coincidence that you happen to be in the same room as them, even if they like your company. Flow's cat appears to be isolated from the other animals, not having any friends or other cats even. Much of the early parts of the film involve the cat avoiding the other animals, especially the dogs, with the closest the cat gets to them being an attempt to steal their food. It's meant to show that this ancient world is wild and that the animals don't all get along, but the cat isn't entirely alone. This is a time where humans do exist, not as advanced as we are today, but with certain advancements like glass and even personal homes. The cat appears to live with an equally isolated human, the only one in the strange land, who spends most of his time drawing and carving images of the cat. These range from small ones around the home and in the yard, to massive monuments to the cats that required ladders for the human or maybe even humans to get to the top of. The cat being carved is important as when the flood comes, it rises up even over the statues of the cat, visually telling us that this era is coming to an end, being washed away. When the floodwaters do come in, the cat's human seems to be already gone, with his only hope at first being to trust the dogs that he met earlier and get on the boat that they managed to find, but the cat chooses not to join them. The cat tries to avoid the waters by going to the highest of cat statues, but the floodwaters reach even above that, and so the cat eventually gives in and jumps on a nearby boat being piloted by a capybara. This begins the journey of the cat to accepting different animals that he used to see as his enemies, starting with the capybara, later a lemur, then the friendliest of the dogs, followed by the more wild other dogs after meeting a beautiful giant secretary bird. The capybara makes sense as the first of these animals to meet because they are the opposite of our particular cat, who is isolated. Capybaras are famously friendly, evolving away from natural predators and being as curious about other species as they are with their own, having no evolutionary basis to distinguish themselves from other living beings that are like them. The capybara would be the obvious choice to give the cat a ride, and the easiest for the cat to get along with as he slowly acclimates to the presence of the other animals. They later meet the lemur, who is interestingly materialistic, collecting human-made glass items such as bottles, but also a glass decoration made by the cat's human that holds sentimental value. With the friendliest of the dogs also in the boat, the group explores how to balance their dynamics, with endearing moments of the characters trying to help each other, such as the cat sharing his fish with the dog instead of stealing from him like he did before the flood. The small boat and rising waters force the animals to work together, at least the ones that wouldn't consistently prey on each other, but a big problem with that is the secretary birds. The secretary birds weave in and out of the film as something more than just adversarial the way the cats and dogs can be. The cats and dogs are shown early on to focus more on fighting over fish as food instead of each other. But the secretary birds are predators, and while their normal diet would be more animals like snakes than cats, they are known to prey on animals like hares or young gazelles when they need to. And with the flood, food choices could be pretty limited. Because of this, the cat and the other animals tend to avoid the secretary birds, with some even snatching the cat seemingly to eat out of the river. The exception to this is one secretary bird in particular who takes an interest in the cat and his crew, choosing not to hunt the cat after he escaped another bird, and later even giving him a fish. This bird proved himself even more friendly when the other secretary birds try to come after the cat, but our secretary bird stands up to them, leading to the birds breaking his wings so he can fly. This gives the bird a reason to join the cat and our friends on his little boat, where he is able to navigate them to what appears to be the highest point in the region being flooded, the last place the flood waters would be able to rise over. The bird, interestingly, isn't merciful to everyone he sees the way he is with the cat, and in fact, when they come across the other dogs, he wants to just leave them there. They get the dogs, and this causes a lot of trouble, but the other animals are able to work around this, and even after the flood, continue to not just be friends, but a family, having been forever changed by how the flood made them rely on each other. For the secretary bird, however, his fate is very different, and this is where things get deeply mythological. It's no secret that the story is about the Great Flood found in our myths all over the world, including in our Bibles. This is a famous tale that most people know to involve the human Noah building an ark so that he could create a new line of humans once the previous sinful humans were washed away. But that isn't the entire story. In the book of Genesis within the Bible, in chapter 6, we actually get a description of the world before the flood, and it mentions figures known as the sons of God, and their children, the giants called Nephilim. Nephilim means fallen ones, and they were called that because in extra-biblical texts like the Book of Enoch, the sons of God are explained as being fallen angelic entities who went against God's orders to not interfere with the development of the humans. These sons of God instead chose to take human wives, creating the giant Nephilim offspring. Due to the sinful teachings of these advanced beings, God decrees to wipe out the Nephilim in a giant flood, which nearly kills the humans as well so that their sinful knowledge won't follow them into the new world. The secretary birds in the film were designed to not just look like birds, but like bright, beautiful angels. Beings that don't just fly above the other animals, but ones that act as if they are above them in other ways. The other animals we meet mostly focus on eating fish, giving a less intelligent or emotional species to feed off of. But the secretary birds try to eat our more intelligent cat. This is a parallel to the Book of Enoch, where the Nephilim, children of the sons of God, were said to eat these smaller humans after devouring all the foods on the farms and their land. The most beautiful moment in the movie is when the secretary bird, along with the cat, make it to the mysterious highest point, but not to avoid the rising waters, which seem like they would just rise above this if not for the secretary birds leaving. This is a destination these secretary birds have all been traveling to, but the intent was to leave the Earth entirely from this point. Once here, the gravity begins to change and everything begins to rise, making it so that even our secretary bird with his broken wing is able to ascend to the heavens above. The cat seemingly gets sucked into this for a moment, but it's not his destiny to rise with the birds, and he instead gets returned to the Earth as the floodwaters begin to drain and the world returns to the way it was. The explanation within the film thus is that the flood was sent for the secretary birds, just as it was for the Nephilim in the Book of Enoch, and once the birds were all returned to the heavens, the waters could recede. This highest point in the film is the equivalent of the real-life Mount Hermon in the Bible, where the sons of God were first said to descend from the heavens in the Book of Enoch. The fact that the birds waited until so long to get to this point emphasizes the selfish nature that the Nephilim were said to have. The sons of God were said to take their human wives and create their giant offspring in order to prolong their influence on the world instead of returning up high, and it makes great symbolic sense that these secretary birds basically refused to come to this highest point until everyone else was already doomed, until whatever forces above were sending a flood so great that they had no choice but to fly into the heavens because there wouldn't be anything for them to stand on as everyone else drowned. It's because of this that I think our secretary bird took mercy on the cat and the others, not wanting all life to perish because of their mistakes. This more noble aspect to this secretary bird story dates to the time before the Bible's writing or the stories of the Nephilim, back to the ancient polytheistic mythologies that Judaism took its inspiration from. In the polytheistic pantheons with their many gods, most of the ruling deities only liked humans because of the labor they could provide for them. For a while, the gods would let humans exist in order to farm their food, but for one reason or another in the different myths, they choose to let humans die in a great flood when they become too troublesome. In the these stories, however, there is always one god who rebels against the others in order to save humanity and let them keep living. In Babylon, this is the god Enki, who warns humans of the flood through a dream so that an important king can build a boat. In Greece, meanwhile, it's Zeus who chooses to destroy the humans in a flood, with the god Prometheus choosing to save them with a forbidden warning. Prometheus is associated with forbidden knowledge in general, being the Greek equivalent to the leader of the fallen angels and the serpent from the Garden of Eden. Unlike the fallen angels or the serpent from Eden that they share similarities with, Prometheus was not seen as a villain for giving humans forbidden knowledge, but rather he was a hero being punished by the other gods for this mistake. For his transgressions, Prometheus is chained to the earth like our secretary bird with his broken wing, being unable to escape it. The idea of good within the Nephilim also comes from the more Kabbalistic traditions from later Judaism, where the Nephilim aren't just wiped out because of the sin that they spread, but because they are divine lights trapped in a material body that they were never meant to enter. It's because of this, I think, that a lot of people online seem to be finding more than just Old Testament flood themes in the film, but something that feels more Christian with the themes of a savior figure dying and ascending to heaven. The association of the Messiah with the serpent is an interesting one in esoteric traditions, with the Hebrew gematria for serpent, Nahash, and Messiah being the same number. This is important in facets of Jewish tradition like the Kabbalah, where these different words can be swapped out with words that have the same number value to reveal secret messages. It's shocking that the serpent, arguably the ultimate evil in the Bible, would have the same value as the word Messiah. But what's more interesting in Judaism is that the serpent is associated with the Christian Messiah in particular. The premise of Judaism is that once good sons of God rebelled against the divine order by misleading humanity into thinking they were the actual gods of the world. Hence why in earlier mythologies like the Greek and Babylonian, these fallen angels or the serpent are presented as gods like Prometheus or Enki. Because of that, even religions and mythologies that developed after Judaism are presented as attempts by the angels to further mislead humanity, including Jesus himself. In Judaism, the story of Jesus can take many forms, but in the Sefer Zerubbabel, he is presented as the infusion of the leader of the fallen angels, the Satan, with a statue of the Virgin Mary. In various texts like the Zohar, meanwhile, this same Satan, also referred to as Samael, rides upon the serpent in the Garden of Eden in order to tempt Adam and Eve into eating the fruit of forbidden knowledge. This is the first act that is said to lead to the birth of those Nephilim, combining the mythology of the fallen angels and the serpent, making them the same figure. The association of Jesus with the serpent isn't just in Kabbalah, however, but even in the more esoteric and early factions of Christianity, including Gnosticism. Gnosticism was a movement from the first centuries of Christianity that embraced the idea of Christ as a savior, but which associated him with the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Gnosticism grew out of the previously Greek mythologies, where the equivalent to the serpent was Prometheus, as we said. So it made sense that they would equate their ancient savior god with this new figure, Jesus Christ. As such, the Gnostics rewrote the biblical stories, with Jesus taking on the role of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, going there to give Adam and Eve forbidden knowledge that will help them escape the false paradise. To really emphasize these ideas of reinterpreting mythological figures, the movie also contains obvious references to the biblical sea monster, the Leviathan. This was a beast so big and powerful, its mate had to be killed by God so that humanity could safely exist. In the film, we see this with a mythical-looking sea monster that continually interacts with our main characters. But while the Leviathan is generally thought of as a dangerous and heinous beast, the film presents this Leviathan as trying to help our characters any chance it can. It's so much a part of the family that by the end of the flood, the cat and the others mourn the loss of this beast, who ends up dying due to being washed up on dry land when the flood waters recede. Jewish myth is largely a metaphor for the same historical conflict deep in the past over and over again with different symbols, and the Leviathan is generally seen as representing the same peoples as the serpent and the fallen angels. Once again telling us that while there was darkness in these figures like we see with the secretary birds, they were also capable of great empathy and connection. Whether or not all of this was intended as part of the creator's vision is beside the point in the end, as the movie itself is just meant to tap into the greater mythological tradition that already exists. While it goes a different route than most films by giving this nuanced portrayal of the figures we think of as fallen angels, it's only another metaphor for the many existing metaphors we already have about this ancient event, and the strange spiritual connection to it. But if you learn something new because of it, that makes it very successful in my book, and hopefully in yours too. If you haven't seen the film, it is available online and perhaps still in some theaters, and I can't recommend going to see it in theaters enough, as the sound design is breathtaking and immersive. But even if you're just in your room and on your TV, it's still an amazing film to watch that I just can't get enough of. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future breakdowns of mythology in animation, and if you really like this sort of stuff, check out our other video we made about the mythology of the Atlantis film, or any of our other breakdowns on our Esoteric cartoon playlist. See you guys there.